everyone. Welcome. Okay, so I want to welcome everyone to today's webinar, Exploring AI Solutions in Software Testing. So today we will dive into AI's potential to transform how software testing is done. Everyone, please feel free to ask any questions in our chat, and we will be answering those at the end of the webinar. So let's introduce today's speakers. I am joined today by Federico Toledo, co-founder and chief quality officer at Abstracta. Welcome, Fede.
Thank you. Really excited to be here, sharing the scenario also with Carlos.
Awesome. Also here today is Carlos Kidman, head of engineering at Quality. Welcome, Carlos. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Yes, thank you as well. I'm super duper excited. Can't wait to show you what we got.
Awesome. So let's dive into it. Carlos, the stage is all yours.
All right. All right, everyone. Hope you're excited as I am. AI obviously is near and dear to my heart. So is software testing. But alas, let us jump in. So yes, why the heck talk about this? Because I think that for a lot of testers right now, they're all really focused on ChatGPT. And they're thinking, how can I use ChatGPT for testing? And all these articles and people complaining and arguing on LinkedIn about it. And it's like, well, there's a lot more to AI than that, you know, and there's a lot of things we can do in testing as well. So that's why I really wanted to talk about this topic. So let's jump in real quick. A little bit about me. I'm the director of engineering for a company called Quality AI. And you can find us on quality.ai, where we actually build AI tools for testing specifically. I'm an instructor on Test Automation University. If you've taken one of my courses, let's go. Obviously, I'm a tester at heart. This is what I've been doing for my whole career before I got into leadership, and I engineering as well. And the one last thing I like to talk about is I'm the founder of Q8 The Point, which is the software testing community here in Utah, where I'm based. I'm a big believer in trying to scale the learning for everyone as free as possible. So with that, let's jump right in. So yes, I have one slide for ChatGPT just for all of you. Yes, I think we've probably played with it enough. You can create bug reports, brainstorm test case ideas, even help you write some code or some SQL. Like, yeah, it can do all of those things, right? But it has some issues. It has limited context because you can only have like a certain conversation length with it, right? So you can't just say like, oh, here's all of my code. How would you make it better? Or write tests for all of my code. Or you can't really do that, right? ChatGPT doesn't have that ability. You have query limits. So I can't just give it a huge HTML, like a whole block of HTML and say, write all of the selectors for this. You can give it pieces, but if the HTML is too big, it craps out. And then it's very manual. I mean, you're quite literally typing and chatting with the AI, right? And then it's responding to you. So if you like the code, then you gotta, copy, paste it, and it's very manual. Things like plugins are definitely gonna help because it provides some of that context. But that drives me to my next point here, the one that kind of sets the stage for the rest of this presentation. AI is so much better when it has the data of your. And you're going to see a lot of these tools I'm talking about take advantage of that, where if they have the context that you're working in, it's so much smarter, it's so much better. And in my opinion, that's where the value really comes in. So ChatGPT is cool, but for testing, I don't really use it for testing myself. But let's check it out. We're going to look at some examples here, UI testing tools, API testing tools, things for code, some analysis tools, even test data, and then Ed and I are going to be showing some open source examples that you can see as well, even touch and play with afterwards, so pretty cool. The last thing to preface the rest of this, Carlos, get to it, I know. The last thing to preface is that AI can be applied in multiple ways. So just because a company says that they are powered or AI driven doesn't mean that everything in their product is AI powered. There might be one or two things that have some machine learning behind it, but that doesn't mean everything is. The other thing is that some capabilities of the product will be very hands-on, some of them will be hands-off, and it's kind of this spectrum. And so as we do this, hopefully you can take some notes down and say, okay, this tool seems really cool. What does that look like in my context, for me, my team? What does that look like? And really apply that for what you're doing. All right, here we go. For UI testing, I put all of these products into certain buckets. This isn't an exhaustive list by any means, but hopefully it gives you an idea of some of these tools that exist in the marketplace right now. So the first bucket is recording and scripting tools. Here's a list of some of them that exist. The next bucket is describing, or NLP, and NLP stands for natural language processing. This will be closer to like ChatGPT, where you can describe what you want and the AI will do its best to infer and generate something based off that. And the last one is things that are hands-off. In my company, Quality AI fits into this bit. So let's look at some of these examples in more depth. First one is Mabel. So for Mabel, what they have you do is that they have you install a recording tool. Once you install it, then you can do the whole recording. I think all of us are pretty familiar with that. You start recording, you interact with your app, and every time you click on something, you type in something, it records that step for you on the right-hand side. It tries to collect as much information about that element as possible. And then once you're done, you click stop recording, and that's your test case. You do that again for every test case you want. Start recording, actions, stop recording, second test case. Rinse and repeat for all the things that you would like to have covered. The AI part of this, at least some of it, comes with things like self-healing. So when something changes on your application, because it saw what it was beforehand, it can try its best to try to determine, okay, they clicked on first name field, the ID used to be first name, but now the ID is something different, it's just first now. And AI is pretty good at determining those kind of fuzzy gray lines and say, well, I'm pretty sure this is still the field that they want, and it'll click that anyway. So pretty cool that you have things like self-healing tests. But you can see that with recording like Mabel, this is a very hands-on approach because you literally have to install and record everything yourself to then get the benefit of AI. Scripting, I'll use Applitools as an example. For Applitools, you got to know how to code, even just a little bit, to be able to use their tools. But in this case, you can see in the screenshot here on the left-hand side, you have all of these site contains title should be visible, form should be visible, username should be visible. I don't know any tester that writes their test like this, but Applitools is showing that with one line, eyes.check login page, it can do all that visual testing for you. And so they use computer vision to help with that. And a little bit of code, which is very hands-on, of course, gives you that visual testing capability. Pretty cool. On the describe side, I'll use Reflect as an example. So Reflect also has a recording tool where you record things, but what makes them a little bit different is that you can actually describe the step that you want, and it'll do it for you. So in this case, I said, use a fake email, and it looks kind of like ChatGPT, where it's just a text field you can type into. Use a fake email, and it actually, in the step here, created a fake email and used that as a step to then enter it in. So every time I run this test, it'll use AI to generate a fake email, and I didn't have to do any of the coding at all. Very powerful stuff. The last one here is Quality AI, my product. We are very hands-off. And the way that we do this is by recording all of the customer usage on your application. And that's how it learns what your customers are doing on the app. And then it auto-generates tests to cover those flows. So in my opinion, that is something that I have never seen before, which is why I work here, because I think it's pretty cool. But with that, there are pros and cons as well, right? So for example, if all of your users are only going through certain flows, then the AI is going to go, well, they only care about this flow, and it may not cover everything you care about. We have some features to help with that, but it's good to understand some of the pros and cons as well, because not even our tool is perfect, I can tell you that. On the API testing side of things, buckets as well, recording and scripting, just like before, describing or NLP, and then hands off. And hey, we're there again too. Let's look at some examples here. For the recording side, a tool that I really like is called LoadMill. And in LoadMill is very similar to kind of like Mabel, where you install a recording tool. As you do actions on the application, it's capturing all of the network traffic. So I click like my username, type it in username, type in email, click login, and that sends a request, right? LoadMill records that request, and then it captures it inside of their server. And at that point, it can then generate a test because it knows what the request is and what the response is. And there you go. That's really what you need for something like Postman, right? So all the actions you take, all those requests that are being sent, it records all of those and can generate tests against those endpoints. Pretty sweet. On the scripting side, I'm using TestRigger as an example. And I call it scripting because even though it looks like English, it has like a very code feel. I still have to I still have to type everything. It's still very hands-on. And in my opinion, I'd rather just code than have to be stuck to their specific keyword-driven framework. But I don't want to, trash them either. The nice thing about Test Rigger is that the same English, all these keywords that you use work for all the different types of things you got to do. So it work for API testing, it work for UI testing, talking to databases. So that's the good thing about Test Rigger is you have one language that works for all of them. On the describing side, I'll use Postbot. Now, Postbot is actually a feature from Postman. So in your Postman instance, if you pay them, I think it's $10 a month, you get access to Postbot. And this essentially adds ChatGPT to your Postman instance. Remember, I talked about if it has the context of what you're working on, it's so much smarter. So here on the right-hand side, we have this API request. We can say add test to this request and press enter. And when we do that, it actually generates the tests inside of there. So if we try to put add test to this request inside of ChatGPT, it would have no idea what you're talking about. Add test to what request? But because we're inside the context of Postbot, or Postman in this case, it can generate the test because it knows what you're talking about, which is pretty awesome. Now, granted, if you've played with ChatGPT, you know that there are, it's good sometimes, bad some others, it's not very deterministic. The same thing will happen here. Some of these tests that it created are not very valuable, but the nice thing is that it bootstrapped a lot of it for you. You can go in there as the tester, tweak some things, and really make it what's high quality, make it what works for you, right? But at least you have ChatGPT inside of Postman. Pretty cool. On the hands-off side, quality again, kind of like LoadMill, where LoadMill is able to see all the requests and responses that happen. Quality AI does the exact same thing. Because we're recording all the actions and events that are happening, we also see that when they clicked search here, that sent a request, got to their server, and the response came back. We also capture this, which means that we auto-generate tests for APIs as well. We can even use this for test data, because now we know what data you're working with, we can help generate test data too. Say, what? I know. And I'm happy to answer more questions at the end, by the way, because I'm sure there's lots of questions. So please ask questions. We'll get there. On the coding side, I'll be brief here. I'm sure many of you have heard of GitHub Copilot, where if you're using VS Code, you get some AI help inside of there. It's one of my favorite AI tools that I get to play with every single day, so I highly recommend it. But I didn't want to highlight too much of it, because I'm sure we're all familiar. There's things that are kind of around your code, and then there's code analysis as well. So let's look at some examples. So for around code, I'm going to use dbeaver. dbeaver, which is it's a tool to connect to databases and work with databases. dbeaver also, kind of like Postbot, now has ChatGPT inside of it. So in this example, you open up this ChatGPT Smart Completion, you type in, show all albums about cellos. And then sure enough, it creates the query for you, and then you can execute it and you can get all the stuff you need, which is actually pretty powerful, because a lot of the times you might have a SQL query and you go, well, I need to change it to this, or what's the syntax again to do this transformation, or and instead of trying to figure that all on your own, you can actually have the AI do a lot of that work for you, and then you just have to tweak the query instead of having to create the query from scratch yourself every time. Pretty powerful stuff. So you can see the context really matters here. On the code analysis side, there's Sneak. And I'm sure many of you have heard of Sneak before. Some other, like a free alternative to Sneak would be like SonarQube. But Sneak, obviously being a paid tool, is a lot more powerful out of the box. But they have a new feature called Sneak Code, where you can actually have a plugin or extension in your IDE, and it can do a lot of its analysis, the security vulnerabilities, different types of scanning. It can do all of that in your code, and then even recommends the fixes for that using AI. So again, another application here to help make your code more secure. On the analysis side, general stuff. The buckets I have here are test integration, things that you can use right now with your current existing tests, whether it's Selenium or Cypress or Playwright. There's some miscellaneous stuff I couldn't really categorize, and then observability. And quality AI, I have there under observability because we're recording all that information very similar to all of these other people. But we don't have the features yet that really show you insights and analysis. And so I put it there to show, yes, we're getting there, but we're not there yet. So on the test integration side, C-Lights. This is actually a pretty awesome tool that you can use. And what they do is called smart selection of tests. So the idea is, if you look at this left-hand screenshot, if I make a change to method 2 in my code, I don't need to run all of my tests. I really only care about the tests that are affected by method number 2. So in that regard, instead of running all my tests, run a smaller subset. Well, my tests are going to be much faster now, right? My test run goes from 41 hours, like you can see on the right-hand side, 41 hours saved because instead of running all my tests, I run just the parts that matter. Very cool. And this is actually something you can apply to your stuff right now. Pretty awesome. Report Portal, I have to call out because yes, it uses AI as well, but it's completely free. This is a free open source reporting tool. And you can actually hook up your current automation to it right now and start using it. So what's really cool about Report Portal is that it uses AI to help do things like auto-categorizing things. As you start to categorize failures, it begins to learn that, and you reinforce learning it, right? And it begins to learn what things go where. So you might say, okay, I see that this cart has been failing. The cart is always high priority when it fails, and so it auto-categorizes it. This is a high priority issue. You can even be smart enough to assign it to the right people because it's learning based off what you're doing. So the more you use it, the smarter it gets. Checks.google.com, the best way to summarize this is it's like Google Lighthouse, but for privacy and compliance. So you can actually run a checks.google report on your app, and it'll give you a report just like Google Lighthouse with here's the priority issues you have, here's some opportunities to make it better, to increase your score. It can give you all of that. So checks.google.com for mobile applications. It's the Google Lighthouse for privacy and compliance. I'll say it that way. Now we're talking about observability here. Goodness, Datadog. What they do is they capture all of the logs going through your entire ecosystem, all your services, your databases, everything. It captures all of that and uses all of that data in order to do some pretty powerful things like generating metrics and whatnot. So one of the cool things about Datadog that I really like about them is the fact that instead of there being an error and you having to find out where things are, what they do is they actually highlight this anomaly and they say, hey, between 5 and 6 in the morning on this day, there was a problem here. Performance went down. Let me also show you all the other services that had an issue at the exact same time. They're probably correlated. And now my focus goes from all of my stack to just these 6 services. So it gets me to what I care about faster and I can fix it faster. This is all AI, very, very cool. On the test data side, there are these main companies, Tonic AI, Mostly AI, and Gretel AI. All of them have free tiers, by the way. So everything I'm about to show you, you can try out for free. Very, very cool. Quality AI is there again because we'll be able to generate test data, but not in the same way that these companies do. So yes, we can do it, but not at the same measure. So it's red. For the data types, when we say fake data, there's a lot of different types of fake data, actually. Anonymized, masked, synthesized, and generated. What the heck do all these things mean? I'll dive into it a little bit more. But test data, as we know as testers, is one of the most difficult things for us to do because you have to manage the data inside the databases. And you go, do I seed the database? Do I just drop it and rebuild it? Do I just keep the rows? Should I have 50 test users and just keep rotating through them? Every company I've seen do something a little bit different. And so using AI can actually help us standardize probably how we all do test data. So let's check it out. Data in AI. So the first one is synthesize or synthetic data. This is where you get real data and you make a synthetic copy of it. And all that means is that the data looks and feels like the real data, but everything is fake within it. Now, if that's like, boom, like what the heck did you just say, Carlos? Write this down, note this down, and do a little bit of research on it because you'll see that this is one of the most powerful things you can do with AI is synthesizing data. Transforming data, you can see here, you get a certain data and then you convert it to something else. I'll show you a real example here. So here with classifying data, we identify, hey, that's Carlos's email. Please don't spam me. This is Carlos's email. The AI can identify this as an email, and then we can transform it and make it so it's anonymized. So that way I can protect this information. So something like a credit card, we can identify it's a credit card and then we can mask it. So that way that data doesn't get to our databases if that's something that we care about. So you can use AI to do all 3 of these things in a pretty, I would say, pretty straightforward way. So how should you fake it? Because goodness, faking the data is so easy, right? Well, yes, but which route should you go? Do you need to classify your data? Do you need to synthesize your data? Can I just use Faker? It really depends on your use case, but hopefully with some of these examples, you can see that there's a lot of applications here and AI is pretty powerful for it. So in this example, we have our production database. We go through an AI model, and that little N looking thing there is from Tonic. You put it through their AI model, and then you create synthetic data that you can give to any database you want. So it's no longer real data. This is all fake data that looks and feels like the real data, but it's not. And so you can throw away this data. You can make copies of the data. You can do whatever you want with it. And they're showing here you can disperse it to all your lower environments. In this example, it doesn't really matter how complex your databases are. The AI is smart enough to still do all that correlation. So I can get 8 petabytes of production data, which is a massive amount of data, and say, give me 1 gigabyte of synthetic data so I can give it for this test run, or that gigabyte is good to see this database, or this is great for the sales demo, or whatever. You can get a massive amount of data and still make a small subset for testing. In this example here, the left-hand side, that's all the real data. You pass it through AI, and on the right-hand side, it anonymizes it. It switches it to something that's not real. It looks real, but it's not. Joseph is not Durello. Lana is not Megan. So it's completely fake, but it looks like the real data. In this example here, this is now masking the data, where we've identified the social security numbers there in red. We don't want to keep that in our databases. That's not what my company's trying to do, so we need to mask it. We can use AI to identify the social security numbers and then mask it, turn it into something that we know is a social security number, but we don't know what the number is. We don't need to know for what we're doing, and so we mask it, and it's just the X's and dashes now. And with some code, you can do it too. Now, this example here, hopefully doesn't look too complex, but these like 15-ish lines of code is literally everything you need in order to create synthetic data using Gretel in this example. And this example is also completely free. So when you go to something like Gretel.ai and you want to try it out yourself, sign up for the free version, you'll see just how easy it is for you to create this synthetic data. And in this example on line 8, I'm amplifying the data. So what this means is that I'm getting a small subset. I had like 10 megabytes. And I said, I want to go from 10 megabytes to 1 gigabyte of data. So I amplified my data. And using AI, I'm able to do that as well. So amazing. So amazing. All right, we're near the end, and then we'll go to the live demos, I promise. This last part I want to talk about is how we can use embeddings in order to do some very powerful AI things. Now, embeddings is all about turning objects into numbers. So let's use some examples here. The first one is getting these words on the left-hand side: man, woman, king, queen. And then you have these columns: living being, feline, human, gender, royalty, verb, plural. You have all these columns. And what you do is you give the word man to an AI model, and you say, I want you to turn this word into an embedding. And it gets every column, living being, all those, and it assigns a number to it to try and give meaning to the word. Once it's done that, and you have this array or list of numbers, it then plots that onto a graph on the right-hand side. It visualizes it. And with that, you can see that man and woman are pretty similar. King and queen are pretty similar. And even the correlation of woman and queen and man and king are there as well. This might make more sense maybe with visuals. So we can take pictures of things, think like computer vision and self-driving cars. We can take pictures of things and do the same process. The stop sign, let's create an embedding for it. It's a sign, 1, yes. Is it stop? 1, yes. English, 1, yes. Symbol, there's no symbols in here, -1. Octagon, 1, yes. And get every single image that we have and pass it through the same process. At the end, we then can plot it, and we can see that, well, anything that looks red with that octagon is probably a stop sign, where the yellow sign is all by itself there in the top right corner. But now we've classified that using AI. So when you hear models that are like, oh, this is a 7 billion parameter model, this is a 40 billion parameter model, what they're talking about is each column is a parameter. So you can imagine 7 billion parameters is 7 billion columns. Whoa. So 40 billion, a lot more obviously than 7 billion, but that's why the bigger models can do much better with creative tasks, because it has a lot more semantic meaning to everything that you've given it. And here, when you think of like ChatGPT, when you go, what's the capital of France? How the heck does it find it? You put in the question, what's the capital of France? ChatGPT then turns that into an embedding, and then it plots the embedding onto the graph. And it looks at what's around it, and it says, well, we know that France is a country. Capital, in this case, they're not talking about capital letters. They're talking about the capital of France. So we're in between travel, country, city, and eventually it lands on Paris, and the model returns Paris as the answer. So this process of turning something like a sentence or an object into numbers to then plot it somewhere is how we can do searches very, very fast. Because imagine searching for text is much harder and slower than searching for numbers on a graph. Computers are very good at that. So Tech Radar, this is the last thing I'll leave you with before we go to the demos. The Tech Radar is a tool, it's a strategy that you can use in order to compare different tools or approaches and pick the best tool for you. I showed you a bunch of different things. You might say, well, we're good on the UI testing side, but for API testing, we need some help. Maybe we should look at Postman and Postbot. Maybe we should look at LoadMail. Oh crap, which one should we use? Use a Tech Radar to help you in determining which one is best for you and your team. If you don't know what a Tech Radar is, at this point, I would say also note this down. You can Google or search for Tech Radar. There's lots and lots of articles and videos on the topic to help you pick the best tool for you. Whew, there we go. So Fede, I'll give the time over to you because we're good for the demo.
Carlos, amazing presentation. Thank you for sharing this nice research, because it's very useful for everyone working in technology to understand how we can empower our testing and our different tasks with AI. And there are so many tools appearing every other day, so being aware of what's out there is really important. And that was a very nice overview of everything. So I have a lot of notes to continue researching more about each of them. Thank you. From my side, I want to share a very short demo of a small product, a very simple product, but I think it's very useful. So this is why we decided to present it to you. It was developed by a couple of colleagues from Uruguay, Damián Pereira and Federico Lima. It's a Google add-on that you can find easily if you search for Testcraft, and it's very straightforward to install in the Chrome web store. After you install it, you have this icon here that allows you to access to the main functionalities, which basically it's under the hood, it uses ChatGPT to help you generate some test ideas, test code for test automation, and also do some accessibility testing. As Carlos mentioned at the beginning of his presentation, ChatGPT is great. You can brainstorm test idea or test data, but the problem is that you have to pass all the context chatting with the chat, right? So this add-on, what it allows you to do is to automatically pass that context with a few clicks. So I will show you for the demo. We have this OpenCart, which is an open source e-commerce site. Just for the demo, we have an installation here. And what imagine we are testing this site, and I want to test this element here that is showing me a summary of the cart. Okay, so what I will do with this product, with Testcraft, is first of all, pick this element. And now I'm going to ask to generate test ideas. So what's happened here is that the add-on took the HTML and passed that as a context to ChatGPT. And now ChatGPT is giving me some test ideas organized in positive test cases, negative test cases, and some more creative test scenarios. And if we pay attention to the response, we can see that even though I didn't say it's an e-commerce site, I want to test this functionality or anything, it understood that this item is showing me the cart. And for example, one test case is verify that the cart displays 0 items, $0 when there are no items in the cart. And there are more ideas. For negative test cases, verify that what happens when a user tries to remove an item from the cart when there are no items in the cart, like a negative scenario, let's say, and some more creative test scenarios verify if the cart total and the item count update correctly when a user adds an item to the cart, applies a discount, and then removes the discount. It's funny because every time I run this, I have different test ideas. But again, this doesn't mean that this is all the testing I have to do. This is only for brainstorming. I think it's very useful for that. And once we have the different test cases, I could check the ones I liked, and I can generate the test automation code for that. So here in the options, I have a few options here to select. If I want to generate the test cases in Cypress or Playwright, I can choose between JavaScript or TypeScript, and I can decide if I want my code with page objects pattern applied or not. So if I ask to generate the code, I will have the code for those test cases here, considering that I choose Cypress, JavaScript, and without page objects. And here we can see that it's generating the code. Again, it's the same thing we can do with ChatGPT, but in a more integrated way because it's in the browser and I don't need to write the specific context. Another thing I wanted to show you about the test graph is that you can also use it for accessibility testing. Let's say I want to check the accessibility of this menu. So what I will do is to pick this element, and now I will ask testgraph to generate test cases or to give me some issues or something if it finds anything. And in this case, it didn't find anything. Last time I ran it, it found some things. This is the typical thing that happens with ChatGPT. Let me try again if it finds something. But it's based on the WCAG standard, and the results are suggesting according to different levels. It could be level A, AA, or AAA. In this case, it's just suggesting me some test cases related to the standard, and I can see the different details. There is a link with a reference if I want to learn more. It's not the same using this than using a specific tool for accessibility like Axe or Wave. Again, because this is using ChatGPT, only based on the HTML of the element I am testing. But I find it very useful for learning. You can brainstorm ideas. You can try to learn as you explore the site you are testing. So again, this is a very simple tool. This is most of what I wanted to show in this demo. And if you want to try it out, it's free, it's open source. And also, if you want to contribute or provide feedback, you are more than welcome to contribute. And now, Carlos, I think you have some other things to continue with, more hands-on activities in this demo.
Oh, hey. Yeah, that was awesome. Like the accessibility checks and actually like seeing it write the code and everything. Yeah, and hopefully people are seeing that like ChatGPT is great, but when you can apply the AI to the context you're in, it's even greater.
Yeah. And this is just the beginning. I think our friends, Damian and Federico, started this project as a way to learn more about the ChatGPT API so they could practice and learn. And they found that it could be useful for this. And probably in the future iterations, they are going to be gathering more context, because this is what makes the big difference in the return of the investment, let's say, about the tool.
Yeah, yeah. Totally. It's so cool to see, like, this is the first version of it, because you can only imagine 6 months from now what's it going to look like, and probably a lot
Okay.
better.
Yeah. What do you have to show us?
I do. Yes, yes, indeed. Okay, I got some code to show. Oh, let me get there right quick. Here we go. So first off, this is an open source, free and open source repo that you can go to and check it out yourself. So if you go to this URL, I apologize if it's small. If you go to this URL, you can actually see the code itself and download the code and do all that yourself. This is completely free for you to use. So what I wanted to show in this example was how, I don't want to say no thank you, how we're going to get these test cases. And I know it looks very ugly, but we have a CSV full of test cases that we have, and we're going to turn them into embeddings and then be able to do a search on these test cases. And this could be useful for quite a few things, but the one that we're going to care about for this demo is if I'm making a new test case, is there a duplicate test case, or are there other test cases that are similar to this? That way I can see, do I need to delete an existing test case? Do I need to update one? Is this a brand new one? I can get some insight into that. So that's what we're going to do. So I have the CSV full of test cases. So like, here's the test ID 1. The summary is verify first name is required. The preconditions need to, you have all this stuff and tons of them, as you can see. So me going manually through this, very difficult. So we can actually use some code here. And this is all again in that repo. We can use some code here to actually convert or encode the texts, turn them into embeddings, and then query on it. So I'm not going to run all those things for you. Just know that we can. This is the function right here to actually work with Hugging Face, which is similar to like OpenAI, but Hugging Face is free. And so you can actually use all their models and data sets that they have hosted. There's a lot of them that are completely free that you can use. So in order for me to use this free API that they have, it's these 2 lines, which if you're a Pythonista like myself, you look at these and you go, yeah, I'm submitting a post request, and then I'm returning the JSON from the response. So my comments are more verbose than the code. I need to do this. I have more comments than code. For the encoding text, same thing. We're going to get this AI model, which is called Sentence Transformer. Sounds super cool. And then we're going to encode or turn those texts into embeddings. And this is the model right here, this all mini LM thing, right? So with 2 lines of code, I can grab any text, in this case, that massive CSV file, and turn them into embeddings. When I do that, you get this, and you turn it into something even less readable. Even less readable, because these are the embeddings for each test case that you saw. And for us, we're like, these are cool numbers, Carlos, but I don't know what you want me to do with this. Well, you don't have to do anything. These are the embeddings that the AI is going to use. So each one of these numbers, or rows, I should say, is a representation of that test case. Say, what? At that point, we can now search the test case embeddings. So here, we load the test cases embeddings. And if you're, again, a Pythonista, some of these libraries you will just know, like pandas, for example. We got to read the CSV into a data frame. We can then load the data set. Fantastic. That's all this is doing, is loading the data set. There's our test case embeddings. At that point, we are going to have to create a search. So I'm going to put like the title of a test case. I'm going to say, my next test case is this. We need to get that sentence for the test case title and also turn that into an embedding. So that way we're doing apples to apples, right? We have embeddings for our test cases. We have an embedding for what we want to search. And now we can search together, right? So now here's my new embedding I'm going to search. And then we search. Semantic search. I want to search this new embedding compared to all the other embeddings that I have and only give me the top number of them. In this example, we're going to return the top 5 results. So let's see this in action. Hopefully it works for me. So I'm going to do quality hug. Thank goodness I have extensions to help me with this. Exactly right. This one here. So quality hug, because we're using Hugging Face, I want to use the search test case embeddings feature, this function. I want to search the Boop test cases. Boop is the name of my app, by the way. So Boop test cases, and here's what I want to search. The user can change their current account type to student or teacher. So this is the new functionality coming from my product team. We need to be able to have people change their account type to student or teacher. Awesome. Does a test case like that already exist? I'm not sure. We have hundreds, thousands of test cases. I'm not sure. So let's run this and see what the AI tells me. And I'll bring this up a little bit more so we can see. Give it a sec as AI is doing its thing. And sure enough, it says, here's your top 5 similar test cases. The first one, which was a 69% match, said, verify the user cannot change the current account type. So literally the opposite of what my new functionality should be. So now I know, okay, there's a test case that's the opposite of the new feature. Should I just delete that test case? Should I make the new test case and label this one as getting ready to sunset, or once the new feature is tested and ready to go, then I delete this one? Now, as a tester, I have the insights, I have the data to make a data-driven decision, and now I can approach it the right way. Where beforehand, I've seen many companies where they just start creating test cases, and then, oh, now other test cases get stale. Oh, these test cases over here have been alive for 3 years, and they're all old and outdated. With something like this, we can now see which test cases are similar and make sure we're not duplicating or overworking. Shoot. So hopefully you see that this is how you can use embeddings to do some very powerful stuff. And everything I showed you is completely free. You can do this right now today. Let's go. Now it's just me, full feature. Let's go.
I have a question about the demo. How do you
Yes.
define the distance between? Is there a because you asked for the top 5 or something, right?
Yes.
So that also works if there is no close test case, existing test case, or even if the distance is very far, let's say.
Yeah, if the distance is very far, you'll still get 5 results.
Okay.
Because it's going to look at all the test cases that you have very fast, because it's not doing text to text. It's looking at those embeddings, just numbers. So very fast, it'll give you results. And it might be like the top result is 2% match, like really small, but it's still going to give you something. But you, the human, can look at the results and say, oh yeah, that's not even close. This must be a new test case.
Perfect. Nice. Nice.
Hey everyone. I'm here just slightly mind blown by everything we just saw. Seeing AI in action is always so incredible. So that was great, guys.
Yeah, I try to get some of, I think Feather's demo is a lot more friendly, where mine, I'm like, look at these numbers, and there's like 10 digits and negative point something. Yeah.
Yeah, but, the first time because I've seen this presentation before and your demo, and the first time I saw your demo, Carlos, it was very useful for me to really understand the power of embeddings in different ways, because this is a very clear example we can use in our context of, as you said, the typical problem of not repeating a new test case. Maybe there is one similar, I want to check that, or bugs if I'm reporting bugs. But it's very useful for understanding how the AI works in order to find these similarities between different elements, and very cool.
Yeah, and I didn't say, like, the CSV that you saw was from someone who let me use their test rail account, and I just downloaded the CSV. So what you see is just a huge list of all their test cases that I downloaded from their test rail account, and then turned them into embeddings, and then was able to search on everything. So it wasn't like a lot of, I don't need to know math to do anything I just showed. It might look like it because the numbers are crazy, but I didn't need to know math at all. I just needed to know how to grab the test cases, how to turn them into embeddings, which you saw in my demo. There's a few lines that you go, turn it into embeddings, please, or encode these texts. And then that creates the CSV of embeddings. Okay, cool. Now that I have that, can you search it for this? And it goes, yeah, here's the top 5.
So the library does this for you, right? Like transforming into embeddings and searching, the semantic search also is provided by the library.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes. And all of those were from Hugging Face. And Hugging Face is like, think of it like a GitHub for like models and data sets. So you can host your models or data sets there. People share their models and data sets too. So the model that I was using to do the embedding and the search was the same model, and it was just one I had connected to Hugging Face.
Perfect. Very cool.
Okay, so should we move on to the question section?
Okay. Yes, please.
Awesome. So here we go with the first question. Rafael is asking, can we add prompts to fake it to have an expected format like we can do with Java Faker lib?
Yes, yes, you can. So I know all three of those companies, Tonic, Gretel mostly, all three of them give you the ability to be as fine-tuned on the data format that you want. So by default, if you were to do that synthetic data conversion and say, here's real data, turn it into fake data that looks and feels the same, it will keep it in the exact same format by default. But you can also have it where you say, I want data that looks like this, maybe provide like a JSON example. And then it'll go, okay, and then generate a bunch of data in that exact format that you want. So you can either let the AI do it for you, or you can be very specific and tell it what you're looking for.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. At this moment, we don't have any other questions. Please, everyone, don't be shy.
I have another question for you, Carlos. What are you expecting to see in the near future in terms of, because your research is showing us the current status or the state of the art, the current state of the art, but do you see something coming in the future that you would like to see in the testing space?
Yes, so I think right now the big boom is the open API, the using not ChatGPT, it's using GPT-3 or 4, and companies you see like Postbot, Taskcraft, they're putting their tools on top of ChatGPT basically, and that's great for OpenAI. They're probably making a lot of money with that. You're able to build products very quickly. The issue is that you're giving all of that data to OpenAI. And a lot of companies are going to say, I don't want to give them my data. So they're going to have to learn how to create these models themselves in-house for privacy concerns, security concerns. You remember, we talked about like the context length, right? Even though you can send this data to OpenAI, you can't send them my whole database schema,
Yeah.
right? Not just for privacy problems or security problems, it's just too much data. So I can't give them my whole database and say, well, how do I optimize this? You can't do that with OpenAI. And so you're going to do things with other LLMs or large language models that are free and open source that I can then tweak or fine tune on my own stuff. That way I can give it my whole database and say, what views can I make to help do this? What view should I make to help make a dashboard that gives my customers this insight?
Mhm.
And then the LLM will be able to do that because it won't have a small context window. You won't have to worry about sending it over the wire. It'll be in-house, so you have control over that. So you're going to see things like Llama 2, for example, that would just barely came out a few months ago. No, shoot, a month ago, something like that. In my mind, shoot, so fast. Things like Llama 2, things like Vicuna, things like you're going to see all these big large language models that are free and open source are going to start popping up, and it's going to require people to grab those, learn how to train them on their own data, and then build apps on top of that. So that's where I see the future, at least the next 12, 18 months, is people are going to start using AIs inside their own ecosystems and building lots of apps on top of that. Which means that a lot of the testers nowadays are going to have to start testing these AI systems. Because before you know it, you're going to be asking, create dashboard for my customer that answers these questions. Well, it's a large language model. It's like asking ChatGPT to do that. Each customer might get a different dashboard. You need to tweak it and make it better so that way it's somewhat deterministic. The testing of that is very difficult. So how are you going to make sure you know how to test it? Like all of that is I'm going to see testers are going to have to learn how to test these AI systems when things are not as black and white. I can't just have a function that says, is this an odd number? That's easy to test. You put in a 3, it should be true. You put in a 4, it should be false. That's easy, black and white. When it comes to AI, is this a good dashboard?
I don't know.
You tell me if it's a good dashboard. You see what I mean? And so the testing of AI becomes a lot more subjective. And we need testers to get comfortable with that so they can help us make a safe world, please. Please, it's going to blow up. I need testers to do this.
Absolutely. And you know what? In the last weeks, I've been trying to research different ways of testing applications that are using ChatGPT, for example. And everything you find is how to use ChatGPT for testing. But this other question is also very relevant for what's coming next for us testers trying to guarantee the quality of or protect the user experience, right?
Yeah, I think because I get asked this question a lot. They're going, "Well, Carlos, you're an AI, and your company literally generates AI, like AI generated tests. What does that mean for me as a tester? Am I out of a job? Am I what happens to me in the next 5 years?" And I go, I don't think you understand that all these new apps, all these new features and products are going to be built on top of this. And who's going to be the people who are helping us analyze, helping us explore, helping us investigate? Actually,
Yeah.
that sounds like a great tester to me. I think a tester is perfect for this. A business analyst, a tester, these are the people that are going to help you test these things because you saw how easy it is for me to write the code for it. For a developer, this is a dream. I can write apps on top of this so fast. But that's also scary because I can write these apps so fast. So having people that are good at analysis, testers specifically, is going to be paramount to the health of not just us as a civilization, but also these companies as well. So you're in the right field, people. This is a good one to be in.
Here we got a few more questions. So
Yes.
this next question is asking, is there any possibility of using AI for pen testing or security testing apart from functional?
100%. So you have to remember that these AI tools, it's difficult because you see like ChatGPT and you think, well, that's AI. ChatGPT is AI. That's the tiny bit. AI is huge. There are companies like Sneak that are already doing this, where they say, here's the things you should look out for. Here's the patterns to be aware of. But we don't know what exists in the world. People are trying to create bad things and whatnot, right? Um, you can train AI to find these kinds of things. If you teach it how to do penetration testing, it will do penetration testing. If you teach it how to catch vulnerabilities and what vulnerabilities to look out for, excuse me, it will do that, and it will do it pretty darn well. But yeah, I'll end it with that because there's a lot more questions. I don't want to take all the
Yeah,
time.
but
But yes, definitely.
one more thing on the top of that is that if you are capturing the traffic, as you mentioned in a few tools that you were showing, and you provide with examples of this is an attack, probably this is an attack, and they start to learn about this type of patterns, they can find those patterns in new scenarios. So this is
Yeah,
the powerful thing about doing this automatically with artificial intelligence, because for a human maybe it's not that easy to detect those patterns in a huge amount of data, right?
yeah. And I had one person ask, like, you record all of our sessions, so what if someone malicious goes in there and tries to send you bad data? Right. Well, what we would see is we see all this good data and all of a sudden this weird one that like sticks out. The AI would go, that's an anomaly, that's weird, and it would immediately flag it. So it's not as easy to, you know, do that because if you know you're to look for those things, you can add anomaly detection to the AI and it can look for these changes in pattern and notify you, be like, I'm not going to use that, I'll flag it. So then Carlos and his team can look at it. In the meantime, I'll keep using this data that I know is following the same pattern.
Awesome, thank you. Let's continue with the next question. So what kind of AI tools do you recommend to QA beginners or juniors?
I actually like a lot of the tools that Fede actually showed. So I think Testcraft seemed like a pretty great one for the UI side. So I'd actually check that one out. ChatGPT does have a free tier, so I would definitely check that out as well. If you're doing API testing, I actually do like how Postman does have that Postbot. I don't know if they have a free tier for that, but I would check those out. I would start there. Testcraft and even the Postbot and ChatGPT, I think, are good ones to start out with because most of them have free tiers.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Let's continue. Hi, great demo. Can Testcraft help in describing the UI context for ChatGPT?
UI context. Describing UI context. Not sure if I understand the question, but what it does today is grab the HTML and pass that as part of the context. In the future, it probably will detect this is an e-commerce site. So all the test cases should take this into account. Or maybe things related to the layout that maybe this is more related to what it's asking. So, and this is part of the evolution. I think is how to gather more and more things of the context so the suggestions are more specific for what I'm looking for.
Okay. Um, let's move on with this one. I'll translate it really quick. Hello, how do you combine GPT chat with solving equations? My experience with temporary state machines is that they don't handle equations or inequations well.
Yeah, when I hear equations, I'm hearing mathematical ones. Um, I wouldn't use ChatGPT for that because that's not what it's meant for. So I wouldn't use it for that. If you're wanting to make a model that's good at math, then I would make a model that's good for math. That's my simple answer. Just
Yeah.
ChatGPT is too big. It's too generalized. So it's been trained on a lot of things, so it can be generalized, and it's part of why my presentation talks about it's so generalized. It may not help for testing because it wasn't trained to be a tester, and so it's not the best tester. And so instead, you can use some of the tools and techniques that I showed in order to actually use machine learning for specific context. In this case, testing. So if you want to do math, then I would use machine learning and train it on mathematical equations so it could solve those kinds of things. But I wouldn't use ChatGPT for solving equations.
Maybe one thing you can do with ChatGPT for this type of problem is asking the Python code to solve that equation or mathematical problem. And probably that answer or that path is going to be closer to a solution than asking directly to solve the problem, describing it in natural language.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of prompt engineering you can do to make it a lot better. But just know that it wasn't meant for that. So you can prompt engineer away, but that'll be you experimenting. And you're a mathematician that works at Stanford, and you're so smart. Please solve this equation. I'm sure there's a lot of prompt engineering you can do. I don't know. For me, I like to be efficient. I wouldn't use a tool that's not meant for that. I would use a better tool.
Yeah, but the same happened with the, I don't know, ordering a set of elements, or there are different things that as ChatGPT is for language, and ordering is not a thing that is directly related to language, but programming languages is more like a thing that ChatGPT can do. Maybe asking for a program that orders a list of elements in a specific language is a good way to get to the solution.
Yeah, you can definitely be creative with it for sure.
We have one last question, really quick, in the last minute. Are we preventing pesticide paradox using AI for testing?
I'll admit I have no idea what that means.
So the idea is that when you, let's say you have a test set of 10 test cases, you decide at some point that those are the test cases that are covering your application, and you don't find any bugs with those test cases. The problem is that probably there are bugs that your test cases are not finding. So there are bugs that are getting stronger to your pesticide. So that's why
Oh,
we
I
call
see.
it.
So you have this confirmation bias because your tests are passing, so you assume everything's passing.
Yeah, exactly. So the
Got it.
typical idea is that maybe you have to uh, change the test cases or the test data, or try exploratory testing instead of a fixed test set, right? In order to explore new things that can lead you to find new things that you
Yeah.
didn't discover in the past. And I think
Yeah. This.
applying AI for this, even ChatGPT or Testcraft particularly, is every time giving you different ideas, because it's not a fixed response. So maybe in this brainstorming session with the chat or with the plugin can help you to avoid that pesticide paradox. We know.
Yeah. I mean, you saw that I have a list of test cases. I could give that to the AI and say, "What am I missing? What other ideas do you have?" And it could give me other things. It says, "Okay, I'm not going to give you the same set. Let me give you a different one." So yeah, I think you could use it as a tool. I think this is where the analysis I'm talking about really comes into play, because yes, that doesn't mean that AI like fixes it 100%. You might go, "Oh, ChatGPT is making these test cases because it's AI. They have to be the best test cases." Well, that's a bias as well, right? The AI is not perfect either, and
Yeah.
so having you, the tester, who is looking at that and analyzing it and saying, this is good. Now the AI is augmenting your process because it's giving you new ideas, and you're able to go through and say, this is a good idea, this is a good idea, this one is trash. But you're able to say that because you are the human, you are the tester. So I would use the AI to help me do a lot of that. But I also wouldn't just be 100% dependent on the AI to do it for me. So will it help prevent? Yes. Will it help you make better test cases, become a better tester? I think so. I think it will. But yeah, I don't see it replacing, because it will have its own biases as well, some good, some bad, and we need someone with that very astute analysis skill to be able to say, good job AI or bad job AI. Just like when you have like another tester on the team, right? It's their first day starting, they're going to go, hey, this is good, this is not. They have a whole different background, different context. At their last 3 companies, we did this. You can talk to them about that. They might be great ideas, but it might not be a good idea right now. Maybe in 3 months, that's a great idea. We can move towards that. Right now, that would do this. And you as the human have that power to actually do the analysis and decide when it's right and when it's not. You have that context, where sometimes the new person hired on may not have that. And you can help them out in that way too. So you almost help each other out in that regard, because you can provide more context, they can provide new ideas, and together you make a better product.
Sounds fantastic.
It really is.
So we have reached the end of today's webinar. I want to thank you both, Fede and Carlos, for everything today. It was awesome, and I'm sure we were all really enlightened by everything you presented. So yeah, thank you.
I want to thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Paz. Thank you, everyone who asked questions and reached to this point. And it's been an honor to share the scenario with you. So hope to see you very soon.
Yes, and thank you for having me as well. Thanks everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. Y'all can hit me up, Carlos Kidman, on LinkedIn or Twitter or whatnot. I'm here to help out and answer any more questions. And thank you to all of you as well for joining me and inviting me to do this. This was fun.
Awesome. Thank you. We'll see each other soon.